So thank you, everybody, for joining me. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for joining us. I know this is a conversation, the panel just before talked a lot about content marketing. And content marketing today has become the cornerstone of every organization's agenda. I don't think I'll be wrong in saying that. I think, however, what we're trying to do on this panel is see that while everybody's trying to focus on content marketing, how many of us are really trying to build that experience from a consumer point of view, and how do you go about, doing that? So I just want to open this to the panelists. Anybody with some opening thoughts, please, on it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Staying true to the theme of the panel, which is about content experience. Firstly, the word experience is not something that we are hearing for the first time in our lives, and that too from a content POV. I think in the world of TV, right kind of scheduling, communicating the new launches, communicating the existing episodes, the big hook points, ensuring the experience on your DTH cable platform is absolutely seamless, and giving the best kind of experience to the consumers. These are things which have always been there. However, what has really changed in the world of digital are actually three things. Firstly, it's a very clearly a lean forward experience. It's not a lean back experience, which essentially translates to the consumer trying to control, trying to ensure that he gets a customized, convenient kind of an experience on a platform, on a device which is not just TV anymore, but on a smaller personalized device which is mobile. Because that's what increasingly the world of media is increasingly becoming, where the consumers are demanding, not just wanting, but actually demanding control, convenience, and customization. The third big thing is that loyalty is now being created and also derived by the kind of experience that a consumer gets to experience on the platform. And hence there's a very tangible shift in the priorities from advertising to actually experience. And because that's what's really going to only drive further loyalty. On Voot, however, and I'm assuming that's possibly also true for a lot of the digital video brands, a lot of content digital brands as well, three big things that we continue to focus on. Experience from a product point of view, ensuring that discoverability of the content happens in a very, very seamless manner. Experience from an advertising point of view, that you show the most relevant ad to the relevant consumer at the right time, driving higher CTRs for the advertiser, but without being too intrusive for the consumer. Third is the off the platform, which a marketer actually ends up driving, that the experience, that the acquisition strategy is very clearly bringing relevant consumers who eventually also end up getting the most relevant experience on the platform. And the fourth thing, which I think we are all straddling right now, is the world of newer market segments, newer consumer segments. In the world of digital, for example, what we are increasingly seeing, vernacular languages, consumers from tier 2, tier 3 rural markets coming in. And it's become that much more important for us to see and segregate how that experience is going to be different for your existing consumers and very, very different for the new consumers. But the challenges remain pretty much standard. How do you continue to drive unique experiences on the platform and not just something which is absolutely hygiene? Secondly, how do you really drive data-driven decision-making, but how do you really scale that up? And the entire experience per se, should it only be driven by algorithms, or there should be an element of subjectivity as well? And lastly, the most important piece, who really owns the experience in an organization? So
taking from that, Vineet, I really want to ask you, so Akash talked about, some of the points, which is, it's important to create experiences. But in your view, from where you come, what is more important, to create that experience or focus on disruptive content? So what do you think if the content is disrupted, and today we know thanks to this digital age, it'll pop up from anywhere? Or do you still need to focus on building that experience to promote content which is based on data, insight, or what the consumers have liked in the past? So which way are you leaning?
So I think it's a mix of both, right? The novelty of disruptive content is something that marketers in every age have been chasing, right? While the commodity we trade is media, what we really dabble in is different kinds of storytelling with the lens of who the stakeholder is, what the objective is, etc. So disruptive content or great content still remains important, but content is getting commoditized as well, right? So it's more and more important, and to what Akash also said earlier, it's more and more important for platforms to be able to justify why users should spend time with you. And that's where the great experience really comes in, right? These could be on-platform factors. How easy is it to navigate from one piece of content to another? How well linked are they? How is your content organized, right? To what ecosystem are you using to distribute that content? Again, today our distribution feeds are governed by algorithms. Does that mean that we limit ourselves to the social platforms du jour? Does it mean that we limit ourselves to only marquee media and use that to distribute our content? Or should we create our own destinations and focus on that? For us, it was super important to be able to own that experience. So while we started making great content way back in 2012, somewhere around 2015, we realized that, hey, we're going to have a lot of content come out and a lot of great content, right? But unless I'm able to create an experience where my content is, for example, Ye Meri Family, our latest web series. If it's competing with a cat video, that's not the experience I want, right? I'd much rather curate a Netflix-like experience for someone who's leaning back, watching my web series on a connected television, right? As opposed to if I'm creating thought leadership pieces, I'd much rather be able to distribute it in a much more relevant context than bring everyone to this platform. So it's a little bit of both. Creating great content obviously is the cornerstone of great content marketing and experiences. But more and more, we need to be much more detail-oriented in how we're distributing it. There are technology challenges that keep cropping up all the time, right? If you look at any of the popular social platforms, or if you look at any of the popular distribution platforms, everyone's creating a browser of their own, right? You open up, and I'm just citing one example which comes to mind, which is a very frequent problem in delivering a great, unified, seamless content experience. A Twitter browser is a very light tool created for an in-Twitter experience. At that point, do I still own the content experience anymore? I'm not so sure, right? So there's still a lot of work to be done on developing great content experiences outside platforms. I think a lot of platforms, including all the Indian OTTs, all of a lot of Indian journalism platforms, like stuff like the Ken, right, are providing great content experiences on their own platforms. How we make that seamless and take it across to others is where the challenge really lies, I think.
I want to ask you, Rachna. Well, building experiences are important, and a lot of consumer brands focus on it. Do you think it's equally important for a B2B brand to focus on building experiences? And can it assist in any way building relationships with your customers? What's your view on that?
Thanks, Rubina. Now, for a B2B brand like GE, which is completely digital industrial, we work with engineering teams, we work with different customers who are mainly into the B2B domain, except maybe a little bit of our healthcare business. Now, that's a field which is very challenging. We have to make ourselves relevant, we have to make ourselves, measurable, different, and yet eye-catching. Now, these are different parameters, very different, and we're competing, not really competing for work, but competing for eyeballs with a B2C brand, FMCGs, who are doing really fantastic content. Now, in a world like that, what differentiates us? Now, I'll play a little video here, but just to come back to the point, we do orderly, process-oriented, some of those daily business stuff in terms of content, but then we break it at times, we do very interesting stuff. when it comes to global campaigns or content creation. We also have very strong owned content. So we have our own publishing, we publish our own media, which is the GE Reports. It's one of the best reporting that I would suggest all of you to see. Of course, I consider it best, but it doesn't sell GE as a brand. It talks about things that matter. And the paid, the earned, the social, and owned all have to work in complete symphony. And I guess that is what differentiates a brand like GE. And matured brands have a lot of nuances to take care of before getting into the market. New brands, startups, entrepreneurs, and those brands, they can experiment. But when you have a matured brand, then people do expect a type of behavior from the brand. And to break that monotony and to come up with something new is always challenging, not only internally for us as brand leaders, but also with the agencies and partners. So can we have one of these videos? I will talk about it after the video.
There's music in everything. There's music in the entire world that we live in.
It's virtually impossible to turn off your ears. Even if you plug them as tight as you can still hear your body, your blood moving.
Whether it be nature, birds,
Bouncing off the walls, the floor, or the ceiling.
man-made sound. There are many ways that you can turn that into music. I can cut a loop out of a machine, You can really start to loop things that are automatically looping in daily life. From there, you can really just go crazy. We've collected thousands of sounds with GE machines, and now I'm making a big drop. A drop, it's a ramp up of energy toward almost like a cliff. The drop is when you fly off the cliff.
Machines are very much like humans in a lot of ways. Just like doctors monitor our health, our job is to monitor the health of GE machines. With acoustics, it can tell you far in advance of there being a real problem, which you might not be able to see with your eyes.
I can spend many hours in here just tinkering. It doesn't quite work. They're just machines. But then there's that one moment, boom. Wow. That's it.
Hello, yeah. This was made in New York by the New York Times, the brand studio, and the GE teams with DJ. And it is one of the best videos that I love because it makes me fall with the machines. It worked very well with engineers, the acoustic engineers and engineers we recruit. This went crazy and viral on all our platforms. We do similar videos. We, in fact, wanted to talk about digital and predictive analysis when it comes to different natural calamities. So we put sensors on a volcano and took the cameras on through the screen, through the different drones, and we did predictive analysis, and the entire story was shot and talked about in a couple of months. So the team went there, they did some, putting in the sensors, not easy, and it was done by National Geographic. So these are type of stuff that we do from the B2B brand. It's tough, it's interesting, it's difficult, but it keeps us going. It's relevant for our audience, and we love it.
I think it's wonderful for a B2B brand to come up with content which is so interesting and offbeat and engaging, But Gunjan, I want to ask you, that leads into my next question. Everybody's trying to do great content, trying to build great experiences for customers, whether it's B2B brands, B2C brands. However, there are many reports which say that in spite of all the effort, it says about 80-85% people are investing in content marketing, but only about 20% succeed in doing a good job and building good content and experiences. What do you think are the key challenges?
So I think definitely personalization is something that is the key challenge. How do you provide an experience to a user where they come on a platform and they're kind of engaging with something, and it's curated for them? So that is definitely one of the key challenges which I personally feel is there. At Savan itself, we've come up with a new UI. So, as a user, you would see a different version of Savan because on the kind of music that you're searching for, your homepage would look different than mine because the content that I'm kind of engaging with is something personalized to my own preference. So definitely I would believe personalization is something that is the number one challenge. Also in terms of how do you capture repeat users is another challenge. People, want to engage with content which they like or, they believe that that something engage or connects with them. But I think definitely the personalization, coming back to the content that you'd like to consume is something that are the two things that people see as challenges.
I think it's a great point that you made that building personal consumer journeys is important.
Yeah, I just want to add three things. One is from the organization point of view. The second is from a role point of view, accountability point of view, and the third is from a functional point of view. From an organizational point of view, at least for a lot of the content organizations and content setups that we have, traditionally, to the point that Vineet also made, I think content has always been the holy grail, has always been the biggest strategic differentiator, and most of the organizations traditionally have always thought that if we are just able to create great quality content, we'll be able to create great brand value, and that shall be enough. But what has increasingly happened is that the business of content consumption cannot be devoid from the experience of it. And that essentially boils down to, as an organization, how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as a content company? Or do you see yourself as a tech company? Or do you see yourself as an amalgamation of content and tech? And that has to be right down to the DNA of every single individual working for the organization. That's one. Secondly, from a role point of view, traditionally, the accountability of experience in an FMCG kind of a setup has always been in the hands of the marketing team. They are the ones, who would look after packaging, product, on-the-shelf display, the final creation of the brand value, blah, blah, blah. But in the digital world, and in the content digital world, there is a content team, there is a product/technology team, and there's a marketing team. So who eventually owns the responsibility and the accountability is a very, very important one. Third thing, from a functional point of view, we tend to equate experiences with new interesting features. And for in a lot of the organizations, in a lot of the platforms, the product manager thinks and feels that by simply introducing multiple features on a consistent basis itself will be a great way to deliver great experiences. That may not necessarily be true in this new world, because we for sure know that out of 100 odd features that may be there available on a certain platform, only a certain minuscule percentage of those features actually get used and actually end up owing the consumer. So these are fundamental truths, fundamental questions from an organization, role, and a functional point of view, which I think are also three really big challenges that we're all facing.
Just leading into my next question. So who do you think, you made a great point, especially in digital content, it's the content creator, it's the tech team, and then it's also the marketing team, right? So who actually owns this? Whose responsibility is it to create a good experience? What do you think?
Look, there are two opposing forces that are at play. We can just go around in this room and ask in how many organizations that each of us we represent, we actually have a role which says head of experience, head of content experience. I would assume there would just be 3 or 4 people who would possibly raise their hands and say yes to it. That's point number one. So I don't know if organizations have still managed to move to a trajectory, to a place where they have started understanding the significance of seeing experience per se as a standalone role, who is essentially going to be working with cross-functional teams. That's point number one. Point
who are doing it. So is it that they have to collaborate and do this together? And if they are to collaborate, collaboration is not easy in large organizations. How do you make it happen? Or do you think there are going to be, the other point that he said, that there are going to be new roles that are going to come up, which are going to be driving this, whether they are like head of experience or audience strategist or whatever. So what's your view on it?
I think everybody is a stakeholder. In the entire organization, you have people from engineering to product to ad tech to data scientists. It's a wheel, and everybody gets included in that wheel at some point in time. With India as such a diverse market, it's with so many different personas, you have to make sure that your product and or your platform is for the masses. You cannot just basically come up with something and delivering it to a particular audience. It does not work like that. So from the entire organization, I think everybody has a role in it at some point in time. To give a very...
Who's responsible?
I would
agree.
not...
All three of you are saying that everybody has a role, but let's say it goes all wrong. Whose neck do you catch? As a CEO, who's next is expected to be on the line?
I don't think there's a particular team or a particular
So are we saying there's no owner for the experience?
The business is the owner.
Everybody's I'm sorry.
The business is the owner. Look, I think increasingly we are moving away from structures which were absolutely top-down, hierarchy-driven, and which were at some level walled gardens to an extent. I think increasingly in the new digital world, more and more roles are all about influencing, are about collaboration. That's the case even in partnerships. As a OTT platform, Voot, we are working with the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons of the world, and at the other level, we are also competing with them. So, right? If we can do that externally, why the same cannot happen internally as well? But to say that one singular team or one single individual is going to be responsible for something so inherent, for something so important, right, will actually make the entire criticality of experience per se actually meaningless, right? And hence, as a business custodian, one needs to ensure that there are enough responsibilities, clear diktats of ensuring that every team, right from your customer service to after sales, to the product guy, to the tech guy, to the analytics, to the data scientist, everyone is singularly focusing on driving better consumer experience.
Rachna, what's your view on it?
I believe from the client side. I've always been on the customer side. For me, it is clearly that the ownership lies within the team who creates it. A part of it could be the internal team, communications, brand, content team, or even the marketeers. And then the agencies, the brand team outside, the external agencies, the advertising agencies, I think they own it. If I have to go and explain this to my CEO saying, oh my God, nobody owns it, or you own it. At the end of the day, the CEO is the keeper for the reputation. But clearly, I think this team owns it. I mean, that's a completely customer point of view, but that's how I would look at. And there have been campaigns which haven't done very well, haven't, done things that we expected out of it. We have to own it up and be okay with it. And that's the reason why you need a culture within the teams and within the organization, which is okay to fail, okay to go ahead, okay to experiment. And I think that's the differentiating factor. If you have a culture to be open about it, to be okay to experiment things, then you get the best ideas. I think orderly, process-oriented stuff should be at work, but that brings in the craziness and the aggressiveness of interesting content to be able to just move with it. So I personally feel the content is the one, the creators are the ones who really own the content.
Okay, my next question to you.
I have a slightly different view.
So that's now the panel is getting interesting. Yeah, of course.
No, because that's exactly what I said earlier. The content creator is responsible for creating great, compelling storylines and great, compelling narratives, right? But in the world of digital, at least, that may necessarily be true in the traditional world. But in the world of digital, the content gets experienced within a product, and ensuring that the technology ensures that it seamlessly works across different devices, on the mobile app, on the mobile web browser, on the desktop web browser, on the TV apps, and across all different partnerships, right? At Wood, when we created a progressive web app, it was to dish out a great app-like experience on the mobile web. This is what was the foundation of PWA, right? And hence, if the experience is happening within a product and the publishing of the varied content pieces is happening by a different team, and the marketing team is actually responsible for bringing in the most relevant audiences on the platform and constantly ensuring that the right kind of acquisition and the right kind of retention is happening. The content team alone cannot be the only team that's going to be responsible for driving better content experience.
So you think it's the product team? It's more the product team. Is that what you were trying to say?
I think it's largely about the product and tech team. But as I said earlier,
Product or tech?
look, it's you're asking
Not an easy moderator.
you're asking the mother to choose amongst the three children. Right, as the song goes, the answer is blowing in the wind. Unfortunately, that's not applicable over here.
I mean, there's
But
a lot of,
siblings always fight. Then how do you drive that collaboration?
there's a lot of interdependency. Like, you can't just do without the product or the design or the brand solutions or the tech team. Like, you have to depend on every team at the end of the day, and I think that's like everybody is a stakeholder.
Sure.
Recommendation. We've all been talking about personalization. We've all been talking about giving hyper-personalized content experiences to the consumer. Is it the responsibility of the product team or the technology team? Okay, to say it's only one or the other would actually be fallacious in our assumptions here.
I think it goes back to something that we talked about earlier. It goes back to the metric of success and who owns it.
I was just going to ask. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What is the measure of success? Can you
Exactly.
Can you,
So is the measure of success how much conversation this piece is generating? Is the measure of success retention, like Akash pointed out earlier? Is it more streams per viewer, more hours spent, lower cost? What is that metric that you're looking at, and who within your organization owns that metric? If your marketing team is chasing efficiency while your product team is chasing retention, those are two goals that may not in most circumstances go hand in glove. Then how do you find a middle path? And then how do your goals go down, right? I think the embodiment in that sense of experience being the bedrock of an entire company goes back to an interview that Reed Hastings did maybe a year ago, where he said the enemy of Netflix is sleep, and that's who we're competing against, right? He didn't say we're competing against the Disneys of the world. He didn't say we were competing against the YouTubes of the world. He said we are competing against something as basic as sleep, right? And that is an experience that an entire company can get behind, right? So if other teams come together to chase one metric, then it becomes easier. But I think the reality is that companies and business units within companies chase different goals, which often don't
Unfortunately, yeah, that's the ground reality. That's the truth. I know we are out of time, but I'm going to ask one quick question, which is that how do you measure the success of a good content experience? How do you measure it? You know, because experiences are subjective. My view on it could be very different from yours. So how is it that you kind of make it slightly more objective and you are able to say, because in the digital world, everything is objective, everything is measurable, right? That's how we look at things. So what do you think could be a good measure of it?
So I'm just going to jump in. I think there are two measures that we look at. Number one is something that's slightly intangible. How enjoyable was this experience? It could be a great web series, could be a single video somewhere, could be a curated experience IRL for our fans or for our business partners. But how enjoyable was it? How much did someone want to talk about it? I think that's number one in terms of understanding experience. And the second is, did it propel your prospect towards your business goal? And however you can try and measure it in terms of, okay, number of leads generated, number of qualified leads coming in, how many closures, how many open conversations, etc., how many app downloads, whichever finer metric you choose. But I think these are the two levels at which an experience can be measured and should be measured, in my opinion.
I think experience that is really unique, that really stands out, and really delivers, most importantly, something meaningful for the consumer. And in terms of something very, very hard and tangible, as I said earlier, and that of course will vary from business to business. For an OTT video brand, the final holy grail for us very clearly is about the watch time, right? Better the experience, the more customized it is, the more control and convenience that you offer to the consumers, higher the possibility and the propensity for the consumer to spend more time on the platform. And that's about it.
Definitely, the experience is something that you kind of go with, but you also, want to see, like, in terms of, like, how many streams are you getting, like, how users are consuming your content, and in terms of engagement is something, which is super important for us as a platform. We try to kind of measure how much time are people spending on the content that they are trying to consume. So there are a lot of, like, studies we do internally. We work with third-party companies and stuff like that. But again, at the end of the day, there are different, parameters that we measure upon, and I think for every platform it's different.
It's similar for us. I think for every parameter is different, and every piece of content is different. For example, there are some stuff we would do for engineers. So we would, look at conversation within that community. There is some content that we would create for the government. So then conversations around it. Actually, nobody buys a turbine on a digital or with a lead generated. But we do have something called a revenue marketing, which means that, we do go out and talk about certain products. And then the measurement is very different. It's engagement, it's interest, it's influencing, it's also conversation. So it's different for different pieces of content.
Great. So we're saying that basically depending on your business objective, tie it down to your business objective. That's what I hear all of you speaking. I don't know if you have time for one or two questions. If so, if anybody has. No, I think we've run out. Okay, so we're already run out of time. So thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for being a patient audience.